Good morning. Today is June 1st, and I decided to do a Book of Mormon Geography 102 to follow up what I did yesterday or the day before. The concept of repenting is to metanao, to change your mind or to update your knowledge. So I went back and studied this internal map. But I also went back and actually read the stories in Alma and also in Mormon, and I considered some of the data and some of the principles that I'm outlining, and I just did some updates. So I don't know that I've fully updated, but for me, I studied the diffusion of innovation and specifically the diffusion of labels. So, Catawba is a name here. If that was in Africa, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but that doesn't seem to be a word like that. Cataraqui seems to be a word that I should find in Brazil. Mora, we have Mero, Moroni, Mor meaning bitter. And then we better not zoom in and look at the etymology of Niagara, because Niagara is going to sound a lot like Iguarara. And so using that information, learning a little bit about the contours. So we think about this country this way. We have these weird borders and everything else. We should think about it as watershed systems. So what I was just figuring out is this right here was likely the city of Aaron, because you can connect, there's a 20-mile highland between the Toka Ocoee, Iwasi, Tennessee, that connects to the Ohi, that's probably Ohio, at Paducah. So Paducah is in western Kentucky. It's past Louisville. So on the river, it's past the Falls of Ohio. And it's downstream. So if you get on this little river, you can just use the current as your friend. And so as I was reading some of the Book of Mormon stuff, and it says they were traveling and they got tired. If you're going upstream, you have to paddle. Or you sail if you have that kind of a boat. I would think they would have a hybrid boat that could do both. But if you're in war games, you're definitely got the paddles out. And then if two boats collides or a boat platform collides with the enemy and you have to start fighting, your arms are sore. You've been rowing a boat. And maybe they, had nice benches designed so they could use their legs more. But now you have to lift a sword and fight. So the valiant virgin stripling warriors were young 16-year-olds, right? They weren't old men who have been veterans of war. So it would be a lot easier for them to row a boat upstream. So the whole getting tired thing in context of the river makes sense. So this would be Aaron. I don't know if I put that yet. So between those highlands, I don't know how much of a city it would be, more than an outpost. This is where men have to travel to cross river systems to go defend the borders. So the housing is going to be man housing. It's not going to be pleasant, so they have some sort of mud, kind of quick houses. And it seems like on the east side of a river, they would build an earth mound and they would put poles in the ground like at Cahokia. So I think Cahokia only had 18. One of these earth mounds had like 36 poles. And I consider this like a mall map or a miniature map, kind of like this map down here. You are here. So if you put a bunch of poles in a circle and you put a pole in the center, you can measure shadow angles. You can calculate your latitude and longitude, or your latitude. And if you know the distance downstream based on traveling distance, you can compute a map. It's not going to be a map as if you're coming from outer space looking down on it from Earth, but you can compute based on shadows your maps. And then you would put a miniature form of that, on a boat. The TV series with Ragnar Lothbrok Vikings kind of had a similar wooden device that he floated in the water when he was traveling on the ocean. And you have to do some math, right? So that means they're doing some math. So anyway, this would have been Aaron. Aaron would take you downstream. You're just sitting on a boat to Pataca. Pataca to the confluence here. Then you'd go upriver here, or you'd go upriver here. Okay, so this, because this is a defensive border, it would make sense that that defensive border came all the way down to this river system. And so you're probably getting your goods from here. So people that would send supplies could send supplies down the main Sidon River, or you could send the supplies here. So what that's telling me, and I need to turn that on, is one of these river valleys, this one, is Nephihah. This one is Lehi. Now, Nephihah to me means Nephi of the north. So what that would tell me is that it had something similar to it as, let me just turn all this on. That didn't help. So I haven't organized this yet. So I already had that. That's not interesting. How about this one? Okay, there we go. So this one seems to me to be Nephihah, and I haven't updated that yet. So going back and reading, and I'm putting it a little bit upstream there. That's a confluence of two rivers. The Tombi Yibi, which originally was pronounced Itumbi Ikbi, or the Alba Ama. And that's why I'm thinking it's Nephihah right there. Nephihah. I don't know if I'm spelling that right. So, Alabama seems to be tied to the first words that Nephi said in 1 Nephi 1:1. It seems like he said something like Allah, Alma, Ima, and Ba, I don't currently have in my understanding of 1 Nephi 1:1, but Ba means soul in Egyptian. So this seems to be a homage in name, this part, the Alabama, to Nephihah. So then you have to say, well, where does that river go? This is the ends of the river. There's a small river called Itawa, Kusawati. I think there's clay up there. Konasauga. So we have agua here, the Iguazu word. And so these are two river valley systems. If I can get from here to here by land, I'm in a different river valley system. So to travel with troops, they have to do a 20-mile march. And they probably have some sort of spear slash oar that they march with, similar to the Romans. And once they get into the other river system, they're not bringing the boats. The boats are already there. That's the infrastructure that Moroni is speaking about in these wars. What he doesn't have is men to man the fortifications. So as I was reading some of that, it's kind of ironic that the people of Anti-Nephi, Lehi, are like, we're burning our draft cards. We will fight no more forever. And they were given a place to go. It says they were to go north. So Cocoa Beach, Merritt Island is probably kind of where they landed. Savannah. And then it says they went north. I could send them all the way up to Montauk, Long Island. This entire island, the locals probably called Montauk. And then I think of Montauk, and it makes me think of the North American bison. But I don't think that's where they went. Or maybe they went there and then their stripling warrior sons went somewhere else. Because remember, exogamic marriage suggests just that. Because ultimately, I feel like the peace-loving people went right here. It's an isolated part of the river. You're at the end of a river. And there's no value for someone to come attack you. So why are they so hell-bent on taking Bountiful? If you read the letters between Amaron and Moroni here, it seems like ultimately they felt like they were cheated. Now, if you go back to the original lands of inheritance, if you don't know anything about river valleys or river systems, and you just came from Arabia and saw this cool waterfall, you're like, yeah, Dad, I get first pick. I want this. But then later, as you learn about navigation and about everything else, you realize a waterfall isn't actually a limiting factor in your ability to expand and grow and develop. Oh, there's Guasu again. And I found Guasu up in North America. And so I'm, again, saying zoo somehow means falls or dangers. So what does Ka'a Guasu mean? Ka means small hill. Now you need to also understand who's now ingrained with the people of Laman and their tribal systems. I initially suggested that this would have been the first land of inheritance for Zoram, the Zoramites. He would have been near Nephi. He would have been at a confluence of a river. He would have understood the importance of rivers and trade. After the separation, the main land of Zoram, which I think never changed, is called Tupinambra. It's these river islands here. It's called Santarem today. And so the land of Nephi, so I said he came back down the Tocantins as a defensive measure. That wasn't his land. Oh, Guarai everywhere. So his main land, look at that one, Ba'u, the soul of the people, was called the Madeira River by the Portuguese, but he called it the Cayenne River. So one of the key markers of understanding this, so this is the Cayenne River. So you've got the initial waterfall, so that's going to have a huge impact on the mythologies of the peoples. You've got the legend of Nephi. So he called this river Cayenne. So somewhere else they called it Cayenne. Cayenne is something about beloved. It is tied to the word cuñado. And then if you look at North America and look at some of these river names, if it seems to have Cayenne in it, in its original Old Tupi form, that's a marker. It's a marker saying the peoples of Nephi were here. So like, I found Amapá way over in Mexico. And this means people of the Pa. Pa could mean clay, could mean birds like ducks. And so it would have been tied to an activity. So Aripu Ana, I think pu is actually clay. And I think pa or pe would be birds, right? So you would build an environment that you could just have birds thrive there. So I was thinking about that when I was digging into Tortuga. So this is the island of Haiti, and I'm going to call it the island of Haiti because that means there was clay there, T. And this seems to be where the Zoramites moved to start to dominate trade in the Caribbean, what we call the Caribbean. Tor means bulrush. Tortoise, bulrush. But if you go and plant this entire island with bulrush, you need to send a few men just to kind of check on it. You don't do anything. You let nature do its thing. And then you go harvest it. But if you plant all that bulrush, it's very possible that as a result, a bunch of turtles may take habitat there. So this is good stewardship. Now you not only have a way to quickly build what I would call as floating platforms, leisure boats, and non-combative, like you're not taking this into the open ocean, you're not taking this down a stream or river with significant rapids. So the word tor to me seems different than the word tar. There's clear a difference in the vowel system, but maybe not. Maybe the blockades in Arabia were using similar platforms. Okay, so if you were to zoom out, and Santorum is the hub of trade for this river system, it's about convergence, confluence, and it's kind of interesting that the people of Nephi confluenced with the people of Mulek. And so the people of Mulek are going to have their own naming conventions that will get slightly updated by the overall military strategy of the people of Nephi. So now we have lands. If you basically go from New York along the Appalachia all the way back up, this is the land of Zarahemla. It's the entire Appalachian eastern seaboard plus the basic river system of Mississippi up to the confluence of the Mississippi and the Des Moines River. So I'm just saying that's probably where it breaks. And I'm assuming I got those rivers correct. This is all the land of Zarahemla. The capital is up here. How did they get to the capital? I assumed they would island hop, coastal hop, see this, go upstream. But you can see that there's these other techniques. I doubt that the Phoenicians were as sophisticated as the people of Nephi, because the people of Nephi were dealing with strange paths with all these river systems. So they had to develop some sort of mapping system, and I'm certain in the sacred writings of Joseph, he kind of outlined how you could figure out something similar to latitude using shadows of the sun. And I'm sure there's some sophisticated geometries and stuff to it, but I'm sure it's also very simplistic. Like, you can just figure it out. And the interesting thing is you can have this advanced technologies, but you can be an oaf and just say, oh, the pole tells me to go on that river, right? Like, you don't have to know, but someone has to know. So the entire coastal plain divided by the Appalachian Mountains, look up Appalachia, So I would say the first major tributary. So I would say this might be, the Arkansas River might be one of these offshoots in the map. That could be Melek. And so now, when we say Zarahemla, that's what we mean. All of that. They probably came up and explored, and they stopped here. So in Louisville, there's literally a place called the Falls of the Ohio River, and it seemed to be pretty impassable. So now you have this convergence of these two peoples, and you want to create new lands. So you want to create a land with a new government. So is the Zarahemla government the same as the Bountiful Freeman government? This seems to be the experiment. And so I initially, the temple I'm not moving, but I initially had the city of Bountiful here. But if you're thinking about this strategically from a defense point of view, that you want to be isolated, this is with the Erie Canal can connect up here, or with some canal somewhere in here. It seems like it can now connect to the Sandusky rivers. The rivers up here are just, I guess I should turn everything on. It would just be so nice if you could say, I just want this river valley. I want it, it's like a hierarchical cluster. I want it to go this big. And so if I wanted Tennessee River Valley. So the Tennessee River Valley should be a subcolor, but in the same color scheme as the Ohio, and the Ohio should be the same color scheme as the Mississippi, because the Mississippi is the main tamale. Okay, let's turn this on. Yeah, I don't want that one. Where's my rivers? So as I'm updating, what I'm realizing is, okay, how about the stories of Alma? This is called the Maumee River. The Cuyahoga is this Hagoth. The Sandusky rivers. Where are their headwaters? That's the map I want to know. So I was doing some math of how they would flee up to here to Cumorah, but they would have like 18 different ways to flee up to Cumorah. And they could play shell games. This seems to be the land of desolation. There's an Isaiah scripture about desolation. This hill may have been a glacial, whatever they call it, dropling, or it could have been a burial mound. And maybe Cahokia was patterned after it. Either way, it doesn't matter if it's an actual hill or a burial mound. It's the same height. Cahokia is the same height as Cumorah. So I would imagine there's a hill shim somewhere in this area. Shemshah means desolation, I think. So if you read Isaiah, you have this Akah Shemshah. So I'm looking for those words in these native languages. And so then, if you travel by water, the highlands is where you have to change water systems. And then you just have some areas that are impassable. So the Niagara Falls is impassable. So if you're going to go north and build boats, you can build boats here, and I'm sure they went north here and explored this. And you can actually go from Duluth to here by boat. It's not a problem. They would have figured that out, and there's so much Great Lakes stuff that I'm not going to go into that. There's so many people that have found so many artifacts there. Hagoth wants to go north. They have an understanding of longitude and latitude with shadow. And it says something about the West Sea. I don't disagree that maybe this is where he started his boat building processes, but you're not building a boat there to set sail. So my original intuition is he's got to get out the St. Lawrence Seaway, and you can get out easy breezy. Ottawa means to trade. So we got Montreal. So this one's interesting. Pakanak means the walnut. There's a river that goes underwater for a while that has Kaza in it. Kachiyobubijuwana. Now that sounds African to me. That sounds like Kazakhstan to me. And so it says he wants to go north. So you need to do some math. If I were here to Santorum to Zarahemla, it takes 21 days. Because I know what I'm doing. 21 days from here would give me any part of this. So I could have landed in Scotland, Ireland, Norseland, Anglo-Saxons, Franks. I could have been any of those peoples. But it said he wanted to go north. So you'll see I have a little dot on a map here. I'm like, how did that word get there? And so you need to understand river systems, but they already do. So the question is, if he wanted to go north, could he go north? Like 400 AD, the Romans were growing vineyards in Britain. It was so warm. So if he traveled at the right time of year and he understood latitude, where's he going? He's going to the North Pole. He wanted to go north. He never returned. Does that mean he got blocked in by ice? Or did he make it? Right? So like, if he were to go over the North Pole, so let's try to get directly north. So if he were to go straight north, he would shoot this gap of Greenland, and he would end up in a river system. And I have no idea where, let me search for it. Where does the, not the Irtysh, is it the Volga? What river's on Kyiv? I forgot. What's the name of this river? Google, you're so helpful. Dnieper. Dnepropetrovsk. Okay, so now let's look at Haygoth wanted to go north. They knew about latitude. He wanted to go to the north. He wanted to see the round earth or whatever. So I want to see where it flows. So the Dnieper, oh, it's coming out there. So some of the rivers flow north. Obviously the Dnieper is not one of them. What rivers? Is that called the Moscow River? Mokbal. Okay, that's the Volga. That's kind of what I was thinking of. So again, that one doesn't flow north, right? But the Irtysh, remember I just saw that Kaza word. Okay, the Irtysh flows north into the Gulf of Ob. So I believe Corianton went with Hagon. So these people are naturally explorers. They've been studying rivers their whole life. It seems like the men go out and do all this exploring. The women stay and live in different areas. And if men don't want to be explorers, they stay at home and they help produce crop. You know, I don't think... So one thing I don't like about the story of Moroni is like, well, if you won't fight... So one group gets to lay down their arms and fight no more forever. And another group wants to burn their inscription draft cards. And he goes in and kills them. Which sounds very modern American, but I don't necessarily like that. Okay, so if I went straight north here... Oh, snap. You see that? So if he went straight north, he was searching for this. But because they had gone from South America to North America, they understood that shadow changed. And then all of a sudden he's in this river. The Obe would take him, like, if he just, sailed that boat, then all of a sudden he's into the Irtysh River. And that's just amazing. That would take him all the way to here. Unbelievable. Okay, so let's just go back here. So to clarify some of the geography and understand the Stripling warriors and where they fought, and to understand the strategy of Moroni with Teancum. So Teancum is a city, and it was likely where he was born. And there was a guy named Tecumseh that was born up here in Ohio. That's where I would put Teancum. Chillicothe, Ohio, or whatever it's called. This is the land of Zarahemla. And it actually goes all the way up. It seems like because of the gates, they didn't actually go into there because there was no trade value. So this would be, if the Zoramites were righteous, this is where the chief financial officers would be, because you would have significant trade. The Kentucky River is part of Bountiful because it's beyond the gate. The Tennessee River is not. So the Tennessee River is likely this Gideon place. And Kentucky, because of the Kentucky River system, flows into the Ohio on the upstream of the gate of the falls. That puts Kentucky as part of Bountiful. The Appalachia divides it, but Tennessee, even though the Appalachia divides it, Tennessee is its own land, but technically it's part of Zarahemla, in my estimation. And so what are the people up here doing? I don't think they're fighting or doing anything. They're growing crops. They're growing corn, wheat, whatever. They're supporting the peoples. Now, if you look at this, of course he's spread thin. So if you go to every river valley, so there's several on this coast, but the ones that matter are the Savannah. Where's its highland? You would probably have these other islands, that with local crops, but none of those matter if they don't get you to Jerusalem. I'm sorry, to Zarahemla or Bountiful. And so my update: the Suwannee River has a name of Guacara, and that's why I'm calling that the city of Lehi. It has a small waterfall there. Guaira, the original land of Nephi. They know that. They know the true value of that. I'm just estimating. And then for other reasons, this is Nephia. And notice these are mouths of rivers. So from a defensive point of view, if you can defend this river, you're not going to get attacked. We had a battle and 5,000 people died. Right? It's giving you the size of the troop at that time. And you have no idea how many people are just living normal lives. These are the military industrial complex. So then it seems like the land of Moroni. Remember, Moroni means the navy. So this is the land of Zarahemla. And so when we talk about the land of Nephi, we have the original land of Nephi and then this extra Waters of Mormon area. But again, you have these highlands that divide. The enemies, I don't believe, are in the Pacific at all. So that's partially why I'm doing some of my updates, because you read some of the story of where they fought and where they fought. No, they're just defending what I would call the South Sea. Well, this is called the North Sea of Sidon. This is the South Sea of Sidon, but it's north of the lands of Nephi. So this middle set of islands, they're not part of the original land of Zarahemla. Manti is its own land, and all of this is the land of Moroni. This is we call it the Caribbean, but this is the land of boats. Moroni means the captain of the navy. And so then you go back and you just say, okay, where's a river system? So when I went back, I had this one before, but I put it here again. The Jacinto River. Okay, that's what we call Houston. And that might have been Antiparra, because if you look at the inlet where it first comes out, Anti could mean east, Para means opening, but it could have been these, right? Like, I'm not married to Antiparra being that one. This one the Spanish called Nueces River, and nueces mean nuts. When the Spanish got here, there were pecan groves. The Spanish didn't plant the trees and then immediately there were pecans. They got here and there was already groves of pecans. So you'd follow that river up. I think this is called the Tao River. In America, we call this the Rio Grande. In Mexico, they call it the Rio Bravo, the Brave River. Matamoros, Monterrey. And so, remember, the further up a river valley, the further away you are from an enemy. Wilderness means open ocean without islands. It's deserted. So, the main river, now we have Nephihah, Lehi, and Moroni. And I'm putting the city of Moroni as the Bimini Road. So it's likely this geopolymer earthwork, it got sunk into the ocean. And if you're trying to defend your lands, I read somewhere that the Corps of Engineers somehow was also trying to connect the Mobile Alabama River to the Catawba, which is way over here. So somehow connect here, because if you connect here, then think about that. You could go up this river, cross a narrow neck of land, and then all of a sudden you could be down to Nephihah. Right? Because downstream's easy. The city of Lehi really wasn't downstream because it had a waterfall there. It's right there, Falling Creek Falls. There's a river here called the Miami River here, but that's really not super important to large-scale war. So Mulek, I've not updated that. That's correct, but you just look at some of these major ports, and you can fill in the gaps with the names that I still haven't done, because Moriantum, Antu means east, so this is probably on the eastern shore. So I got 3 cities on the eastern shore: Gid, Omer, and Morianton. So because of Florida, I think this is all out of order. So Moriantum, Omner, and Ged. So you just look at the ports. Moriantum, Omner, and Ged. And by ports I mean like where rich people like to live today. I don't think people like to live on Jekyll and Hyde Island, but maybe they do. You know, so some of these really expensive ports. And then what's interesting about the city of Mulek and its battle and defense systems is if you know the river systems and your enemies don't, your enemies are just traveling up the coastline. And this is where the word near and nearer comes into play. If I'm near the city of Mulek, that means I'm in the neighborhood. If I'm nearer, that means I see the coastline, I'm close enough to shore to see the coastline and to see landmarks, that means Ishanti, that I know where I am. So when you read some of these stories about battles at near Moroni, we're making an assumption that the battle's on land. No, they could be on floating flotilla armaments. They could have houses on these floating flotillas. They could have larger boats pulling them or tugboats pulling them. Or I don't see that being efficient. I'd see that they'd somehow have a rowing system for a floating island. They could somehow detach them, row, attach them. Obviously, those you don't want in the open waters. But those certainly could have been the blockade for the battle here. So then it seems to me like this might have been Antipada, like this whole loop before Manti. And so the Mesoamerica people still aren't going to like me because there's nothing down there yet. So we have Amapa, Antigua, Iguazu, Antiguazu. We're supposed to say that means old. That means East Igua. But that could mean old, right? Because where did they come from? They came from the east. Igua, Iguazu, Iguana. These are the large people that came from the east. They're not the originals. They're not the aboriginals. So then you look at the river systems here. You understand that it seems like Zarahemla wants to take everything to the Rocky Mountains. And ultimately they want to say the entire river system. And that goes back to the concept of the people of Laman saying, you cheated us of the waterfalls. It's kind of the same thing. Zarahemla's like, well, we want the whole river system. Well, you don't realize how far that goes. But then the Zoramites and Amoron, they lived for hundreds of years with the people of Nephi, and they learned their systems. So they're the ones that probably informed the true peoples of Laman that, hey man, you got suckered. And I don't think that was Nephi's original intention, but yes, they did get suckered. Okay, so then the battles that I reviewed with the Stripling warriors, now we have these names. Kumini, Zeezrom, and then Manti, right? So this just works. So this could be Antipada. This could be Kumini. So I don't know what pecan is. This could be Zeezrom. I don't know that there's a lot that grows here. This seems to be a better choice. But like there are major areas along this route before you get to Manti. Manti is its own land. Do you see why, from a naval point of view, Manti is its own land? So they talk about in the battles with Helaman and the sons of Helaman, the Stripling warriors, they talk about staying on this side of the main river, being afraid to cross here because at some point you have visible armies and you're not traveling through the wilderness. Mostly as a function of the type of boat you have, right? You can't do that. but you can hug you can hug shorelines. Okay, so I updated that. So then, if this island system that we call the Caribbean is the land of Moroni, the land of the navies, I'm generally going to say this is the good guys. Because you, maybe, this could have been Antion, maybe. You know, I lean against that. I think this was Antion. And one of the reasons I do is, again, it's these weird cosmic borders. We have an island that has two people fighting over it. Very strange. This island has Epstein Island and the beginnings of the Bermuda Triangle here. So I mapped out supposed Bermuda Triangle. And for me, the Bermuda Triangle data point that's important is 29 degrees. Right there. Because that's where the Red Sea crossing was. So then I was like, whoa, what happens if I put a Bermuda Triangle over here? Okay, and where it's at exactly doesn't matter. I'm just giving it scale. But this is where those tic-tac pill things are coming out of the ocean faster than the U.S. Air Force can track. You know, we've got the Bimini Road that was there. I put one in the Levant. So this could cover the entire Nile. So remember I said that maybe there were boundaries or territories, but there were like custodial closets where the gods would come down and operate. And so this is the crossing at 29 degrees. And then everyone's talked about, so you could just do 29 degrees and make a swath across this. You know, look at this. This is where people love to fight Afghanistan for some reason. And then, I don't know the exact coordinates of what's called the Devil's Triangle. But I just took that triangle and just kept moving it. Sometimes I made it vertical one way and the other, but it always encapsulates 29 degree north component. And then if you were to connect those, that seems to go through Hawaii. Haleakala. Maybe not. I'm looking for 29 degrees north. And I got lost. Okay, 29 degrees north. It's not quite Hawaii. I don't know if any of those are visible islands. But talk about wilderness. This is deep wilderness. So this seems to be never in the war stories of Mormon and Moroni. I would estimate, so if I follow the traditional Olmec archaeology, they disappeared 400 BC. That just tells you the people of Nephi arrived 400 BC and just drove them out. And if you look at the statues and stuff, that means they were traders from Africa, the Olmecs. But they seem to be bullies because the people of Nephi drove them out. That's kind of the traditional view. But recently with the geopolymer view that maybe these were created by Komtiki, which would have been pronounced Komtiti, then it's a different story. Oh, they just built them and then kind of just went on their way. So if you go to the highlands here, across here, you could get there. So Mexico, Old Mexico, I don't know if it's Mexico City or Tenochtitlan, or if that's one and the same. But this was called the land of Judea. Why would it be called the land of Judea? It's somewhat arid and it's landlocked, right? There's no rivers connecting it to the ocean. So Mexico City is a highland. You can get into these river systems to get this way. You can get into these river systems to get this way. So this would be an important trade route to connect the oceans, reasonably narrow. So that would be Judea, and then Jerusalem would be the obvious answer. So how is Jerusalem described? I don't know how Jerusalem gets all the way down here. Okay, so if Judea is an arid land that has no connection to the ocean, I would estimate Jerusalem would literally be Salt Lake City. Unless in the Guiana Shield or the Brazilian areas, you can find a saltwater river or a saltwater lake, a Dead Sea, with a nearby freshwater lake and river. So Salt Lake City, Utah has the Bear River and the Bear Lake from the north, and it has Utah Lake and Utah River, or whatever, from the south. Provo River? I don't know what that is. And then it has the Jordan River, right? And so it makes you think, who is talking to Brigham when he said this is the place? So I would not put Jerusalem down here, but I haven't dug into this a lot. So where the land of Ishmael was and all this other stuff seems to me to be all of the, what I would call the good. This is fluvial soils. So the Madeira is the land of Nephi. Flowing out, I think, were his brothers. But if you go upstream to another river system, Manaus could have easily have been the river valley of Ishmael, for example, in that story. Because how is it that he runs into his father so quickly? And so then they have these stories about chariots and horses. And I wonder if that was scribal influence or if they're, in an area where they had chariots and horses. The boats are never mentioned is really strange. So this is really good farmland. So this is maybe Shemlam, whatever. This is where King Noah and Alma had their kingdom, and they overlooked, and they saw the Nephites or the Lamanites coming up the river. That is that place. What these names are, I have no idea. Lom, I think of Shalom. So we have Lom, the place of peace. So Shilom, Shimin Lom, this might be the place of corn, and Shilom might be something like the place of sugar cane or something. The point is this is very fertile once you get up into the Guiana Shield. So you have to get all the way up here. This is very fertile land. Maharo is an island of Mujeres of a type. So that could have been one of these lands. But you put your women on islands, so they're not part of the story. And one of the other things I was picking up on, when you read Alma, it says, and they captured our men and women and children. And we tried to trade one soldier for an entire family because they captured the entire family. So conventions of Geneva are not in place. Like there are no war conventions that are agreed upon. So one interesting data point is that was the original case, and then after the Messiah death event, in the end game with Mormon and his son Moroni, not only did they capture the men, women, and children, but then they started to sacrifice them. So our understanding of the Messiah death event is embedded in the difference of the war stories. So now you go read Moroni 8 or whatever, where talks about cannibalism. And then you read the cronistas, the colonistas, the conquistadores, and they're starting to proselyte. This is our God. Oh yeah, we know about him. This has happened, this happened, and this happened. No, none of that happened. That's blasphemy. And they hung them all and burned them at the stake immediately because they spoke blasphemy about the disciples or the apostles. I don't have the data of what that blasphemy was, but we have enough data to understand that the Messiah death event that we currently have is fiction. And so that's why I utilize language that's as accurate as I currently can use, which is, I call it the Messiah death event. And if we read 3rd Nephi, one voice is angry, I killed you all. Then some motherly voice, how many times have I gathered you like a chick? And then a third voice, a raspy voice, an aspirated voice, a still small voice. Whether it's a man or a woman, I don't know. First one seems to be masculine, second one seems to be feminine. I would estimate the third one's feminine. This is my beloved son, hear him. And then a beloved son descends from the clouds, he talks to the people, he teaches, he prays with them. And then it says, a multitude of angels or saints or people from the clouds come and talk to them. And then he says something like, behold your little ones. I'm estimating there's some little ones coming down from the clouds. And I'm estimating those that are coming down from the clouds were part of the Messiah death event. And they're resurrected. So it's one thing to say, I am God, I will lay down my life for you. Versus to say, there's no greater love than this, to lay down your life with your friends. Men, women, and children slaughtered and killed. Oh, it seems like after the Messiah death event in America, the tactics of war and prisoner exchange and all of that changed. It's very interesting. So we do have enough data, and the key data point was the 3 days of darkness. We just apologized away from it. Well, they said 3 hours. That was the marker. That was the cartouche. So Venezuela may mean, I forget what Bena means. Colombia wasn't the name of that before. That would have been funny if they actually had it named that before. So I wonder if they knew the location where he was coming, Colombia. But then you have this mountain system called the Andes, which means east. Because if you live on this side, the mountains are to your east. And these are big mountains, right? So the Quechua word for Andy means east. And so this entire coastland would seem to be pretty isolated. You're going to climb over a 10,000, 12,000 foot mountain to go fight someone. It's in a different river system. Straits of Magellan are very, very difficult to navigate. And so, I do try in a scenario that maybe they landed here and somehow they went around, or they went around land. It just doesn't fit. But at some point they explored, and people went all the way to Tonga. And the DNA of research shows that. So, with all that being said, this seems to be Haiti, what I would call as the Zoramite Trade Center. I was just reading how they were surrounded on the south and on the east, and that would make Cuba a better candidate for that. But just, let's imagine you're the Zoramites, and you're sending these armies and financing these armies. You don't want the armies in your trade center, right? You don't go to Costco and want to see armed military outside the door. You put them on the borders. So then if you read how Moroni eventually, brings people, he rallies the troops. So what he's doing, he's going through all these villages, and he says, they're attacking us. Men, please come help. And he raises armies as he's returning. And then it says Ammoron is kind of stuck somewhere, and he's surrounded on the east and on the south. So clearly Moroni's not giving him an escape route. We don't know the quality of Ammoron's boats, but we know Moroni knows more about boating than Ammoron. This is probably not an easy run, but what are they going to get to? Because he later finds out that the sons of Helaman with reinforcements down the river are able to secure this areas. And at some point he had a big battle where bodies were thrown in here. He kind of snuck into the back door of Manti. I don't think he snuck into the back door this way over land. I think he knew of more ports here. So if Koba is the city of Manti, wherever Koba is. Can I even see Koba? Maybe the limited understanding of the people's fighting are like, oh, we took between Cancun and Playa del Carmen, there's a port. We took Port Morales. Yeah, there it is. But they didn't realize about Xcaret, or maybe they took Xcaret, but then they didn't realize that further down here you could kind of come back in to get really close to Quintana. Ana, Jehovah provides. Yucatan, Merida, America. And what's kind of interesting is Moroni, you think about, he's raising the title of liberty. He's saying, this is the land of America. A people that are free men. That is, there is no overlord. There's no one above them. But there's a wordplay, and the kingmen would have used this in their marketing, their PR. He's become Amemekra, the man that loves war. So instead of being America, a land of freedom, he's a land that... Now think about Vietnam with people burning their draft cards and all of that. Isn't that what the kingmen were kind of doing? So you read the story and you've always said, oh, Captain Moroni, greatest ever. If all men were like Captain Moroni, the very gates of hell would be... Okay, now read the story differently. Now go back and read Nephi from the perspective of layman, right? This is what phenomenological indifference is about. You have to understand the perspective of the other party. So a lot of people want to read Scripture and say, Scripture defines mores. This is right and this is wrong. No, Scripture is telling you a story. And if you understand Eastern philosophy, the purpose of Scripture is to educate and to enlighten. I've now learned that Captain Moroni was fierce, direct, honest, valiant, stubborn, holier than thou, absolutist in his worldviews. It's my way or the highway. But he had a job to do. He was raised in a certain culture. I'm curious where he was born. So Teancum was likely born up here. He knew this area. And it doesn't seem like Moroni was really careful with that area. It seems like Moroni knows this area. So Moroni knows this shortcut. Teancum may know the shortcut to Bountiful. So I originally had Bountiful at, the main river off the Scioto. But after thinking about it, you want it further isolated. You want it to be able to be escaping into another river valley system if possible. So I'm starting to think Three Rivers, Pittsburgh would be the city of Bountiful. One of the rivers would take you into the Ohio River all the way out. The Allegheny would take you north, which would get you really close to Cumorah. And either the Delaware or the Potomac, the Shenandoah Valley. So the Shenandoah Peak is where you would have to cross. So recall, he took captives and he took them to Bountiful. Teancum did this, right? So it seems like Teancum knows this land. Moroni seems to know this land. And then there was another person called Lehi. And I don't know if Lehi kind of knew the interior here of Florida, like that was his wheelhouse. Maybe he knew the lands of the Suwannee, the Suwannee. Where's that one at? That's another one, isn't it? I don't have it. Oh, it's just this one. Yeah, the Suwannee is just a small river in Florida. So maybe he was kind of like the Florida guy. Lehi was the Florida guy. Seems like Moroni would have been this guy. But he knew how to get all the way up there. Right? So he knew how to get through these passes. Teancum seemed to know how to get through the Shenandoah Valley. So the Potomac currently has a falls on it, and that would make it impassable. But you got to remember how much water all these people are stealing from the river in modern society. Is the Potomac impassable? Because with the Potomac, and that's the other thing I need to mention. So I've been anchoring to the concept of cocoa means something. So remember Cayenne. And Cayenne in Old Tupi was like Kiuana, which somehow means beloved, which somehow ties to Cuñado. But now I have Guyana here, right? I have Ana, but I see Cocho here. I see Cocho. But this is what the Americans called it. And this is what one of many native peoples call it. So if we could map place, location, river, and all of the names by all of the tribes, and we have certain markers. Guara is a marker. Iguazu is a marker. And just put them all over the map because they're cousins. The Cuñadismo is everyone's a cousin. So when you look at some of these languages and they'll have, these are all speaking the same language, and then they'll have another group like way over somewhere else. Well, you lived in a free society where you could travel anywhere you wanted to and probably live any lifestyle you wanted. You just needed to contribute. You needed to work. So maybe a group got antsy and wanted to go to a different area. So then all of a sudden the languages, look, there's this isolated pocket way far away from everyone else. Well, that's kind of the whole idea of a free man society. So you could read that as Conoco, or it could be Coco, Coconono. It seems to be the word for a mound. So I've explained, it seems like on some of the eastern shores of these rivers, they would have, a 20-meter raised platform. They'd put posts in the ground, and I think that was kind of like their "You Are Here" mall map. These rest areas we have on our modern roads with a map on it. But Coco or Conoco could somehow mean like down, up, and down, which would be the mound building technique, the circular mound. How you use a beast of burden to build a mound. You're not doing this with your hands. And so that means you have to have beasts of burden. Where are the horses? Where are the whatever? So you go to Florida to actually this Cocoa Beach, and you look at the archaeological record. Merit, that's a Egyptian word. Oh, it was named after some Mexican or Spanish guy named Merit. No, that's not a Spanish word. Merigo it might be. So Cocoa Beach, what's interesting to me is it seems like the modern federales, they like to put their little defense systems near some of these sacred places. Cape Canaveral near Cocoa Beach. Washington, D.C., and all of its military-industrial complex against, Shenandoah, which just sounds beautiful. Kitani, that's again where I see that Cayenne word. So if you look at the archaeology here, they have tapirs here. What's a tapir doing here? A tapir is an animal you can eat for protein. This is the heartland of the tapirs. So the discovery system is a function of the order from where they came. So in this scenario, I imagine Nephi went to the highlands of the Paraguay River system, traveled a little bit overland, whether he traveled here or whatever, and then went down the rivers and created a new society. This was the land, this river system was the land of Nephi. The Tocantins here is a different river. And if you look at it, we have Uruaru. If you look at it, he has to come from a higher point to get down to the Tocantins. So where are the Tocantins? Tocantins are right here. Okay, so this is a completely different river system. This is not the land of Nephi, but this is where he builds defensive measures. So is that one of these? I don't know. Was he building a defensive measure against Lemuel? All I know is that was a defensive system right here at the Tocantins. So again, we have Guaira. At the Tocantins, you're building defenses on the highlands because you're protecting yourself from the end of the Paraná River. So where's Paraná? Okay, so look, Goiânia. And you can look at the defense measures. Where are the highlands? And you build defense measures, and then you have villages beyond the defense measures. Very beginnings. That wasn't his original land. His original land was here. Seems like his brothers were here. So this was the land of the peoples of Nephi. So his brothers were kind of going out here, down in here, on some of these tributaries. They called this the Cayenne. So if I go to the Madeiras, to the Cayenne, if you lose Santorum, right, you can't get up this river. You're locked. You're landlocked. So what you would do is if people are attacking you, is you would build fortifications and you would retreat. Retreat, retreat, retreat. So Titicaca could have been the Mosiah out, because once they get here, and if there are friendly cousins here, they're free. They can then get up there and get across. I don't think this is the way they would have gone. I think, if we studied some of these couscous, Peru words, I think they would have got, I think Mosiah would have got here. Like this would have been where he would have got to. Now how would he have got to there where he traveled through rivers, over land just a little bit? That then brings into mind that, well, this is the river of Nephi, this one. Whose river is this one? Whose river is this one? Manaus. With Manaus, I could go way out here. So some idiot that was fighting with, I think his name was Orogino. He was fighting with the conquistadors. He gets lost. He says the word Marañón, which sounds like Moroni, river. He finds a river. He's like, oh, it's a river. I'm just going to go downstream. He gets on that river. He gets out here. And he's the one that came up with the name for the Amazonian women. Okay, so that river took him pretty far. But I would think you'd want to get here. And I don't know exactly how that would happen. I have no problem with you getting here, because if the people of Nephi know about this crossing, but you don't, and maybe they had a crossing, at the potentials of the rivers, right? So there's a really big river that runs almost the entire part and then stops here. So that would be a good place to have a crossing. This one looks like a good place, but probably isn't based on rivers. This one seems to be a potential good place, and then you have 2 or 3 places to cross. I'm pretty set on the city of David there as being the primary crossing. So if you're traveling by car, you cannot travel from North to South America. The Darien Gap is just impassable. So you would call that the narrow neck of land. It was the part that hinders you. It's a blockade. If you're traveling by water, this is the narrow neck of land, Boquete. So you can see that it's a highland there. You've got a river coming up to it. You've got a river coming up to it. You've got to portage 15 to 20 miles. Maybe more. But that's the minimum portage. That it's called David as the river. And then he has a David here. So I think Angola, City by the Sea, I think this might be David. That place I just showed you. Angola, like if I had to pick, that would have been Monterey. And the reason I picked Monterey is it's got an infinite supply of protein. The fishing is amazing. The Salinas River, you can grow crops. And so that would seem to be Angola. But Angola could have been all the way up to the Columbia River Basin, right? We don't know. So this Ammonihah, so Melek could be as far south as the Arkansas River, but it could be the Missouri. It could be any river that's kind of going eastward up to the Rocky Mountains. You've got to consider populations with the Lakota and Dakota, and think one of these is them. But I would put Jerusalem, which for whatever reason is way down here. I would put it up there. But maybe that's what I'm gonna... But like Jerusalem, like why would you name something Jerusalem? Why would you name something Judea? So it seems like these are names to remember the homeland. What is the reason to name it after the homeland if it's not the geographic characteristics? Right? I got an arid area not touching ocean. Oh, I've got a Dead Sea and freshwater lakes. Which makes us wonder if the Sea of Galilee was the only lake, because we have 2 lakes feeding the Salt Lake. And so this concept of having land northward, land southward, sea east, sea west has to be in context of what you're talking about. Okay, so what sea is this? This could be called the Sea South if you're referencing the main river or the land of Zarahemla. But in context of the land of Moroni, this is the Sea South, the Sea North and the Sea South in context of either Moroni or Manti. This is Lake Erie is probably the Sea West. It's a different Sea West, right? You have to have context of ubicarme. I don't know if that's a Spanish word to like locate myself. There's not just one Sea West in the history of all of the Book of Mormon. So just like there's a stoppage in Panama, there's a stoppage here. You cannot get up here through the boat system. And you have to portage through here. And again, it's kind of that 20 miles. So it looks like every one of these, like this gap, it's actually got a name. Where'd the gap go? So we have Biltmore Mound, Mount Pisgah. Pisgah seems to mean to look out. And you look at how many Pisgahs there are. There's like in the Bountiful area, you know, this area. There's like 20 city names that have Pisgah on. Just means lookouts. Hawk Peak. So there's probably some 20 miles of portage to be able to get from this river valley across the Allegheny Plateau into the other river valley. The land of Asheville. Where is Asheville? The locals had races. Yeah, it's called the Swannanoa Gap. The Army Corps of Engineers at one point wanted to somehow connect this river system to Catawba River system. So you can see that with the Santee or the Catawba system, I can then jump into Bountiful. So this is a way to Bountiful. I don't think this is the city of Bountiful. I think the Bountiful is going to be more isolated, like more secluded. But the Army Corps of Engineers at some point were saying somehow the Catawba could connect to the Mobile River or the Alabama River. Because I don't have all the rivers and the snakes, there's probably just a few miles. So this might be, you know, kind of like the triangle, right? The triangle to be able to, it's the hub over land to be able to get to there, downstream. You just get on a boat and you're downstream. And so like today, if I were to get on a boat and go from Pittsburgh, so I don't know how they get you through that. I don't know if they have a lock system to get you around that. But if I wanted to go to Pittsburgh to the Gulf of Mexico, downstream, 7 days, upstream, 9 days. And that's just on a riverboat that's not trying to be in a hurry. So once you pivot and look at everything from the perspective of river travel, the Book of Mormon geography starts to come to light. So, you know, I did some review, I repented. I actually went through and read much of Alman's stuff to try to get some of the markers. But you're going to notice that I'm updating, right? I'm not making a significant change because the diffusion of language, of technologies, is unchanging. But what is updating is some of the minutiae. And so I wanted to somehow put Antipara at the Gulf of California, tie it to the Colorado River. But if you read the story with the battles, no, these are just ports on the interior of the Gulf of Mexico. These three are correct around Florida. They're just Lehi needs to come down here. Moroni needs to be out. It's an island. And then, you know, which rich port these are. Like one of these goes to Augusta National. Mulek I'm still happy with. And then this is a complete mess because it's not stretched correctly. But certainly bountiful is the Ohio River Valley above the Ohio River Falls. They have a Desolation City that I haven't fully worked on. Cumorah is Cumorah, right? Like, I don't have a problem with that. So, I don't know that Teancum's on this seashore. I think Teancum would be near a Great Lake seashore. It wouldn't surprise me if Nehor is Manhattan. So Montauk, Long Island, was Algonquin. And it seems like they went there and they planted a bunch of trees, because you read the history of the city of Long Island, published like 1901. They're building houses, cutting down trees, maybe 1801, I don't remember when. And some Algonquin just shows up. He's like, "What are you doing with my land? I planted all those trees. Why are you cutting them down?" And so that could have been Montauk, could have been Teancum if you want to put it over there. Like, I don't have a problem with New York City being part of this story. Specifically Long Island. Long Island is big. I know the Algonquins had planted trees there. And so this idea of planting trees and being Johnny Appleseed is like ingrained. You don't have to have mass populations to go on an island and plant seeds. It's like, "Hey dude, what are you doing?" "Oh, I don't know." "Hey, let's get 50 guys and let's go hang out on an island and plant seeds." Takes a month. You're done. You leave it. The thing I still don't understand is all of the, so it's probably somewhere between, it's probably like Amulon or something. What I would call is Guatemala. So it talks about the need for concrete houses, there's no trees. And ironically, you couldn't find them without LiDAR because they're covered with trees. So did the climate change, or were they good stewards and they planted enough trees that eventually it changed how much water is being saved before being absorbed, and it makes a desert blossom like a rose? I don't know. But those pyramids I used to have a view of the pyramids of the Maya. I am Maya. That's a palindrome phonetically. You can say it forward and backward. But are these little pyramids built out of this geopolymer? Are they houses? Right? We don't have a lot of information where people are saying, "Well, we went inside, this is what we found." Are they burial mounds? So, what is the purpose of all these small pyramids in the Guatemala Mayan, for example? They recently found like another 500 of them doing LiDAR. And there were these huge villages and civilizations. That just tells you it's a nice place to live, right? So if you're building a society where you're free men, you have to work. But if you're intelligent in your design, you have minimal work to do. So I don't know that I need to go through anything else. I kind of covered the high points of my primary updates. So Yaiti means there's clay on the island. You look at the history of this island, there's clay on the island. Tortuga, you plant bulrush, maybe turtles come and inhabit it. The city that we call Santo Domingo, this little river here, whatever it's called, some guys landed in port and they just went and hung out in the river and they just found some big nuggets of gold in the river. So you have gold mining. Would the tallest mountain be the hill Onidaya? Oni means navy. Onida, is it Onida or Onita? I don't know, but what I do know is when you have a mining operation, that's where the poor people work. The rich people don't work there. They don't live there. So the Ramiumptum would be built where they live. I estimate the rich people would live in a cove. These people know about ocean travel. Remember, Ramiumptum could have this some sort of deep water element. And so I would put the Ramiumptum at one of these coves. You're away from the workers, so you go preach to the workers. This is where the workers are working. This is where the mines are. The clay might be over here. This would be the best protected cove because you see you have an island blocking a lot of the weather. So the Spanish, when they came, they knew nothing of hurricanes. So they would just set up, here and a hurricane would hit. So if a hurricane hits, this cove might protect you. I have no idea what the general path of winds and stuff are in the area. Or maybe it's that cove. But the point is, the land seems to be the land of Zoram, which is called Antianum or whatever in this part of the narrative. I'm just seeing if I can turn off this purple thing, but now I have way too many. So this is the land of Moroni, but I don't know if I put it in this folder yet. So the Caribbean is the land of the military on the ocean. It's the Pirates of the Caribbean. Okay, so it's in there. We can turn off the triangles. And so, what just happened? Yeah, thanks. I don't want these to be hyperlinks, but thanks for making them hyperlinks. I appreciate that. If you don't think we're in hell, use Google Earth Pro. Pro. Okay, so this is the island right there. So this is the folder. Let's turn that off. So this is where the Ramiumptum is. You've got a gold supply. So it would make sense that Amaron is being surrounded here. He's being surrounded on the east. He can't escape there. And he's being surrounded on the south. It doesn't seem like they're concerned if he wants to go that way. Assuming that this is where Amaron is. Like, the rich people don't want to be fighting, right? They send their military out to fight. They sit and have tea. What's interesting is the Epstein Island is right here. And I haven't looked at it in a while. The solar circle complex with its rocks and stuff. I don't recall this white thing, so I think this has been updated since he died and all that. But again, anything that's weird or hinky in the Cabal, like the Bermuda Triangle somehow almost touching this island. Some weird ritual system here. It tells me that the Cabal has some knowledge of some of this stuff, and they're trying to use it for their advantage to get power and corrupt and do all their other stuff. That Merritt Island is right next to NASA, right? Like, what are the odds of that, right? That, and one of the reasons I picked this island is it has contention. It was Haiti, but there's been war here. The Caribs and the Ottawags, right, from early days. Puerto Rico just seems to be a good island that probably got caught up. These were probably the workers. There probably was sugar cane all along here before it was brought in. So why would you make up stories that there wasn't certain things already here? If you look at all these words, and then you go to Iberia, look at Guernica. You're like, they have all these words like Guernica. And the reason is the caliphate probably evolved its language from Egyptian. But you have Guernica. Let me see if I can find Guernica. Okay. Oh, that's way in the north. I didn't even know that's that far. So the other one I was going to look at is the Battle of Granada. Yeah, so this is what this is where the Moors were finally driven out. You have Guayaquil. So I'm just thinking how many words were actually in Spain before 1492 that and then how did the language of Spain change after 1492? And if Spain had spent all of its time trying to finally drive out the Moors from here, and they're dark skinned, and then they get over here and they're like, these names all sound like Moorish names. There's a bunch of black people here, and it's like they've known about this for thousands of years, and we're just getting to know about it. Then, from an ethnocentric, self-preservation point of view, you're going to start making up fiction. I have no doubt that there were Amistad trade boats that were bringing slaves over here, but that doesn't mean there weren't already dark-skinned black people here. Those are two different things. You're conflating those things. There wasn't a horse because the Spanish hadn't brought them yet. There wasn't a black person. There wasn't rice. There wasn't wine. There wasn't sugarcane. All of that's falling apart with the archaeology. It's just, just a matter of time. But what's falling apart is all of taxonomies and everything else cannot allow for oceanic travel. So if India was the major merchant of all merchants, and they had a trade port here, and Nephi shows up with more gold than he can deal with, he's buying all of the trees, all of the horses, all of the fish, all of the birds. He's going Noah, right? He's going all out Noah. 2 of every kind. And then if he takes them from there, he doesn't know where they came from. And they thrive anywhere here. Like, whether it's a potato or an alpaca or a piece of corn, maybe it was derived in Peru, or maybe it wasn't. I'm not going to argue either way, but what I am going to say is that's unknowable. If he got all of some goods here and went and did Johnny Appleseed in South America, and then that diffused through North America, anything you want to say about the jungla negra, the American black walnut. Well, what about the Persian walnut? What about the English walnut? Where did the walnut come from? You have no idea. Did he bring a few walnut saplings with him from Persia to America, to America, to America, then somehow got brought to England? You would not know that. Just like if I went out into my field and planted a persimmon tree, which is supposed to come endemic to Japan. So I think the life lesson is it's unknowable. So who wants to say it's knowable? That's the nature of the cabal. Oh, we know for a fact that X. No, the fact is we don't know much. But we do know how to follow breadcrumbs. This economy was probably a fiat economy. The shells were a fiat exchange system. So these guys that are buried with these ceremonial cloaks that have thousands of shells on them could just mean he was a merchant captain that traveled up and down the river and delivered goods 1,000 times. Right? He demonstrated trust with another people 1,000 times. Pretty interesting. You learn from Iriantum and Tarshish that you don't travel with gold. If you don't travel with gold, they rob you and steal your wheat. It has no value to them. So I wonder if the Tor floating boats were used as a barricade, or I wonder if Solomon just went big with his navy, right? Like he would say, let's do these trains. Let's have 1,000 boats come into port at the same time. And we'll have military, the idea of circling the wagons, having power in numbers. So I don't know exactly what the Solomon solution was, but I know that Nephi knew what the Solomon solution was. Just like I have an intuition on some of the details of the Messiah death event, but clearly the Book of Mormon demonstrates that the Messiah death event had some sort of human sacrifice, cannibalism type rituals. And then the chronistas just verify that when I look at the woodcuts and the 1492 and thereafter conquistadores, colonistas, and chronistas. The truth, I believe, is what sets us free. I don't think it's a belief in a certain God system. So if you listen to Joseph Smith, he was very esoteric. All of the knowledge we gain in this world will be for our benefit in the eternities. D&C 121. At the very gates of hell, it'll be for your good. That sounds like namaste. It's all good. That doesn't sound like a Judeo-Christian Western religion. But those that surrounded him wanted to build a Judeo-Christian religion. And the realities are, is if we don't build a comprehensive geography, then even if we were to get the other records, many hundreds of years it would take? We don't have hundreds of years. So the final problem with this large hemispheric model is you're saying the Indians were stupid and without Nephi none of this would have happened. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying the cousins of nations worked together, grew and expanded, and Nephi just created a framework from which they could be successful. So that, so I still think about that Chief Joseph is called by Sitting Bull, "Oh, you're my cousin that builds the little boat." That tells me that the Lakota Dakotas, which were probably further downstream before they got pushed west, so they were probably in the Duluth kind of area. They were probably in the Great Lakes area. So it seems like the Great Lakes is where Hagoth made his name. So this is why he would build big boats, right? You could travel from Duluth to Niagara by boat. And the boat was big, so as many people as wanted to be on there could be on there. And it seems like that area of Lake Erie would have been the West Sea where he did all of his boat building. And then, he's an explorer and he wants to go north. So they know the way out to St. Lawrence already in smaller boats. But if he's going to build a boat to go north, he's got to go and build the boat in Lake Ontario, which is not the West Sea. So if Lake Erie's the West Sea, he's got to cross this problem and he's got to start building boats here. So it seems like he got his name here, Hagoth, the builder of big boats. And I'm saying that because, Duluth is here. We've got the Wisconsin Dells. We've got river systems here. At some point, the Lakotas got pushed this way, and the Black Hills was not their land. They kind of took over from some locals. Again, those locals probably weren't perfectly happy with any of that. But the Black Hills is here, and then we have the Battle of Little Bighorn, and then Sitting Bull runs north into the safety of the borders. Chief Joseph, for whatever reason, is getting chased by the Federales. The local Indians don't give him permission, so he does the long about. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually crossed the border and the Federales said, "Oh, you didn't make it, we're going to capture you." But listen to the words he says. "I lay down my weapon and will fight no more forever." If that doesn't sound like this title of liberty statement for the word of peace, to lay down your spear. And to lay down your spear is to actually turn it into a paddle. So we have this idea of a a sword being turned into a plowshare. In Egyptian, it would be a spear turns into a paddle. But then if you bury that spear, to some degree you're saying you don't want to travel on the rivers anymore either. And that's why I put the Hopi where they put them. They're at the end of the rivers. They don't have to travel by river. They can kind of give up that system. And so Sitting Bull made it across the border. Supposedly, Chief Joseph didn't. Chief Joseph then went and met the President of the United States, etc., etc. So why does the President want to meet these people? Unless they have some knowledge of who they are. And then Sitting Bull, did part of that traveling show with Wild Bill, I guess. And then when he returned home, the Federales went after him and killed him. "Oh, we think you're going to join this renegade group." And it seems like an Indian, I use that word loosely, and so an ancient American of one class is the one that actually pulled the trigger. Two of them actually did, that shot and killed him. So this idea of bravery, this idea of one brother cheating another brother, seems to be ingrained in ancient American histories. So I may be part Wea, Miami Indian, which is up in this area. So when I went to buy a book about Tecumseh at the bookstore here at Serpent Mound, I immediately flipped to the book to look at the Indian tribes to see how comprehensive it was, and it didn't mention Wea or Miami. I'm like, this book knows nothing about Indians. And then how are the Miami, right? How do we have Miami here? You have Miami here because to get from Miami to Miami is merely to sit on a bus, which is what this boat system is, and hike 20 miles, right? So if a group of these people were reinforcements and they were young men, maybe they just stayed down there, married the local women. The patriarchal versus matriarchal genealogy I haven't fully figured out, but there's a lot of things I haven't figured out. Oh, look, you see me. Sarasota. Sara, does that mean beautiful princess, or does that mean desolate? Regardless, I took some of this, read some of Alma and Mormon again, and did some updates. Have a good understanding of Judea, Antiparach, Uminim, Montan relationship, understanding here. Locked in that Aaron would be one of these highlands. Gideon would actually be a separate land of Bountiful, which would make this the Tennessee River Valley. Aaron is probably on the other side of this mountain, or it's in the mountain passes. So from Aaron, you could hop down to Nephia immediately, and Mulek would connect you to these highlands as well. The hill Amnihu might be Mount Pisgah, but I don't think that would be a hill. I have no idea what that is. Like some of the stuff, like I haven't. It'll fill in, right? Like the hill Oneida seems to have been on this island. Siron would have been up here. Like I have no idea why they have it down here. Siron means Mount Hermon. So if I'm Phoenician, I visibly see in the background the mountain, Mount Hermon. So the tallest mountain here is not Mount Pisgah, but it's called Mount Mitchell, but it's next to each other. They're in the same area. Pisgah means lookout, likely in Egypt or in Hebrew or Egyptian. I don't know. Okay, may God bless and keep you on this beautiful day. Shalom. Namaste.